Do you ever wonder why several countries that are democratic end up falling into autocracies? Well, if you do, you're not alone. Many people are concerned. We have Putin in Russia, Erdogan in Turkey, and Viktor Orban in Hungary, who's no longer a leader, thank goodness, and many others. So the question is, why? Why does this happen? So we can do this with students. We can we can tell them what's causing it. There's researchers by Stephen Levitsky and many other political science researchers who have looked at all kinds of cases and come up with some general points. But the students wouldn't be thinking. So the critical thinking method is to do this on the critical thinking website, uh, to have students look at case studies and then try and figure out causes for themselves. They're not always going to agree, and you're going to end up with some interesting discussions where some students emphasize certain things and then they can look at the case studies. So you can find it at the Critical Thinking in History website, um, that's listed there. And I've pointed out with the red arrow, if you click down on the homepage, down to Autocracy versus Democracy, that visual, you'll see the lesson there, and you can see what you think. So I want to say that this isn't about long-term dictatorships like Xi Jinping in China. This is about democracies that fall into autocracy. Um, so this lesson has case studies, and but first of all, we have to iron out with students because they may not know what's the difference between democracy and autocracy. So in democracies, and the US here I'm considering as a democracy, technically a republic, representative republic, but a democracy has fair elections, free press, individual rights, speech and religion and all, rule of law. Autocracy have unfair elections where the leader stays in power no matter what happens, government-sponsored press, undermining the free press, weak on rights, especially speech and sometimes religion, and the rulers are above the law, often associated with corruption. So here are the cases. So some of these are pretty famous. Mussolini in Italy in 1922, Hitler in Germany. Some of them are not as well known. Finland in 32. The US had some interesting things happen in the 1930s, and you can take a look at the reading on that. France is not as well known, or Belgium. India under Indira Gandhi went into autocracy. Peru, Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, Turkey under Erdogan, Russia under Putin, Hungary under Orban, Austria, and Brazil under Bolsonaro. So these are some of the case studies. And I assume some teachers would have students read them all and generalize. Some might just use a few of them. So I want to point out, it says at the top, did it fail? Did democracy fail? And 4 of the 14 did not. It's really important to have contrary cases. So what we're looking at is, why do democracies fail? And the 4 of these cases are they didn't fail. That way we can compare the ones who did and didn't fail. Well, wait a minute, if it happened here but didn't happen there, kind of thing. It's really important to have contrary cases. You'll learn this in science class also. So Finland, 1932, the US in the 30s, Belgium, and Austria. So what are the readings like? Well, this is one of the readings. I picked two readings out of them that were shorter for the purposes of the podcast. So I'll bet you didn't know much about France in 1934. So here we have, I'm just going to read it. France had been a democratic for decades in the 1930s. Economically, the country was prosperous, but the Depression caused severe hardship for many people. On February 6, 1934, a mob attacked the Congress, shouting, "Hang the deputies." The rioters had weapons and fired their guns. Conservatives in France did not oppose the extremists because they mainly feared socialists. Some conservatives saw the extremists, which they called young patriots, as shock troops that could be used to intimidate their liberal opponents. Some conservative newspapers and leaders dismissed the attack as a legitimate protest by ordinary people and denied any plot to overthrow the government. Others said the attackers were patriots, trying to save the country from corruption, communism, and dysfunction. Conservative leaders in Congress undermined an investigation of the riot. The Conservative Party formed a group, the Victims of February 6th, where the attackers were viewed as heroes and victims. The conservatives who protected the rioters went on to have successful political careers. With no accountability for the riot, democracy was badly weakened, violence increased in France, moving towards autocracy, and would be dead in 6 years when Germany invaded France. So what do we see here? Well, it had been democratic for a long time. The country was prosperous, but there really were problems during the Depression, as there were everywhere. But really important, conservatives backed, these are rich, powerful people, backed the rioters. And that's an important ingredient here, in my opinion. So that's one of the readings. The other one is Austria in 2016. Austria had been a democracy for about 70 years, a wealthy country with a high standard of living. However, the extreme right-wing Freedom Party did well in the first round of the 2016 elections. Many Austrian voters were upset with inflation and the high number of refugees entering the country. These voters feared, incorrectly, that large numbers of immigrants would overwhelm their government welfare programs and pensions. Actually, working-age immigrants would increase tax revenue that would help fund the programs. Voters felt the moderate parties were out of touch and ineffective. The Freedom Party advocated violence against immigrants and Austria for Austrians. They wanted traditional Christian religion rather than the Muslim religion of the immigrants. Their candidate won the highest number of votes in the first round multi-party race, far ahead of the second-place finisher. Much of the Freedom Party's support came from poor working-class people, while rich, more educated people supported other parties. In the subsequent runoff election, however, political leaders from across the spectrum, these are all classes, united behind the right-wing party's opponent, who eked out a narrow victory, and Austrian democracy continued. So what do we see here? Well, it had a democracy for a long time. It was a wealthy country comparatively, and rich people did not back the extremists. So what do you do with that? Well, discuss it and look for patterns. Another way to do this is with a graph, a chart. And here you have a chart. It's quite complicated, but it explains up at the top. So if you look down at the bottom of the chart, I had to abbreviate everything. So WLTH is a wealthy economy, violence, fear. LDR is having a charismatic leader. How popular were the populists or the extremists? That's important. The degree of polarization, was there a crisis? Did the rich people support? And was religion an important factor in backing the extremists, as opposed, I mean, they might oppose them, and actually they did in Belgium. That was a key point in Belgium not becoming autocratic. Okay, so we already talked about having the negative cases, the cases where democracy endured. The traditional analysis of sliding into autocracies is that if you have a long-term democracy being around for a long term, that helps to prevent it, and wealthier countries tend not to go into it. So that's a chart. Actually, they don't always. So then students have to deal with this. So those are the sort of what we could have explained to students if we hadn't said anything. If we look at the chart, other than those first two columns, so long democracy and wealth, some other interesting things. So leadership is charismatic leaders, and the U.S. had a charismatic leader in FDR, but did not fall into autocracy. So, okay, that's kind of interesting. Polarization is a factor in many of them, but some of the ones that did not become autocracies also had polarization. What that tells me is that polarization is a factor, but it's not a controlling factor. We can have polarization and we can get through, countries can get through threats to democracy. This is what we talked about before, the support by rich and powerful people, and you can see what those show, and how important is religion to the extremists. So those are some other factors, and think about the kind of conversations you can have with these various factors and students trying to see the patterns in the various case studies. But students are going to struggle. Some students are definitely going to struggle with this. Like, I don't know. It's too complicated. I can't see. So, what are the patterns there? So I thought I would put in very short, you can see they're all 2 lines, of interpretations. So this way, students can take the interpretations and see what in the chart supports which interpretation, which would be a little easier for them. So if we look at interpretation C, this is one of the traditional ones, that having a long experience with democracies, they can look at the chart and then see if that's the case. And the role of ordinary people. This seems to be very important, and it empowers students that they have a role in helping to preserve democracy. It was a factor in the Austria situation. And then the role of religion, and that autocrats seem to use religion as a weapon, and what do students think about that? And polarization is a key. Now, I do want to point out interpretation J, which is you really can't generalize. So some students may think, like, yeah, I mean, every one of these is different. The leaders are different. The specific situations in the countries are different. So that's an important factor. So what do we know from this? If we give students a problem that they have to figure out, there's going to be some benefits. So those benefits are that the students are figuring out, they're generating causes from a chart or from readings, and then they're evaluating it. And it's engaging. Rather than them sitting there drooling on the desk, watching me babble on and on about what I've learned from reading Stephen Levitsky and other political science researchers, they have to figure things out. It's active and it's more engaging. They're learning about the types of government, so they're engaged, but they're also learning about autocracy versus democracy. They see their own role in the political realm and what they can do to preserve democracy. They see U.S. history in the context of world history, since one of the examples is from the 1930s in U.S. history. And they see today's issues, which have to do with autocracy and democracy, in the context of history. They're thinking historically. So there's many benefits to this, and I think that this could be helpful you might want to take a look at it, www.criticalthinkingandhistory.com. Thank you.